Greetings and salutations one and all, everybody. I'm Joshua Orro, the Mustang Prince. And welcome to Mustang Prince Orro Reports. Now today, I'd like to take you guys on a little journey into a world deep below the earth. A world with weird, eccentric creatures. But the thing I find interesting about it is that it pokes fun at everything English related. That world is Wonderland. Written in 1865 into 2 books by legendary English author Lewis Carroll, the Wonderland books told the story of a little girl named Alice who falls down a rabbit hole while following a white rabbit out of curiosity. While there, she meets characters like the Tweedleboys, the Mad Hatter, the Cheshire Cat, and of course, the Queen of Hearts. Now, over the years, there have been many film adaptations based on the 2 Wonderland books. While mostly everyone knows about Walt Disney's animated classic from 1951, there are a few others, like a 2-part TV series from 1985. A few years later, the Care Bears had their own adventures in Wonderland. Then, in the early 90s, there was a live-action TV series called Adventures in Wonderland, which I used to watch when I was young. Hallmark made their own Alice film in 1999. Also, Studio Ghibli gave us a film in a similar style of Wonderland called The Cat Returns. But last year I was warned by one of my favorite reviewers, the Cartoon Hero, about one Alice adaptation that was released on DVD by Cinematronics in 2010, and I gotta tell you, it's completely awful. For those who don't know about it, it's a film where the whole audio track is an Alice in Wonderland radio play from the 1940s, where Dinah Shore plays Alice. And the film includes lazily drawn MS paintings. Gosh. And I know what you guys might be asking. What was the purpose of that piece of garbage? Well, in my opinion, like most direct-to-DVD films in the 90s and 2000s, Cinematronics was trying to cash in on today's subject, which was released in theaters around the exact same year. So, with that mentioned, you probably might guess what today's subject is. But before I get started, I want to tell you guys about an Alice musical that my friends at Musical Theater Village are doing this month, called Alice One Cat's Tale. It's a fun musical version that's almost like the book, but the plot talks about the Queen taking everybody's magic except for the Cheshire Cats, and kills anyone who attempts to have fun or tries to rebel against her. So, the Wonderland creatures need a leader to lead them to freedom. In the show, I've been cast as 4 different characters. Well, technically 3, but anyway, delay over. Today's subject is an Alice film that was put together by my favorite director, Tim Burton. So let's get started. Released on March 5th, 2010, the movie is Tim Burton's Alice in Wonderland. So, let's begin, my friends. Alice, an unpretentious and individual 19-year-old, is betrothed to a dunce of an English nobleman. At her engagement party, she escapes the crowd to consider whether to go through with the marriage and falls down a hole in the garden, after spotting an unusual rabbit. Arriving in a strange and surreal place called Underland, she finds herself in a world that resembles the nightmares she had as a child, filled with talking animals, villainous queens and knights, and frumious bandersnatches. Alice realizes that she is there for a reason, to conquer the horrific Jabberwocky and restore the rightful queen to her throne. So, what are my thoughts on this film? Well, it was dark, creepy, twisted, weird, a little disturbing, absurd, and thrilling. Did I enjoy it? Well, yeah, I did. But in order to explain more about it, I'll explain some information in my Mustang notes. Now, Tim Burton signed with Walt Disney Pictures to direct 2 films in Disney Digital 3D, which included Alice in Wonderland and his stop-motion remake of Frankenweenie. Burton developed the story because he never felt an emotional tie to the original book. He explained, "The goal is to try and make it an engaging film, where you get some of the psychology and kind of bring freshness, but also keep the classic nature of Alice." On prior versions, Burton said it was always a girl wandering around from one crazy character to another, and I never felt any real emotional connection. His goal with the new movie is to give the story some framework of emotional groundings, and to try to make Alice feel more like a story opposed to a series of events. Burton focused on the poem, the Jabberwocky, as part of his structure, and refers to the described creature by the name of the poem rather than by the name Jabberwock used in the poem. Burton also stated that he did not see his version as either a sequel to any existing Alice film, nor as a reimagining. However, the idea of the climax of the story being Alice's battle with the Queen's champion, the Jabberwocky, was first added in the video game American McGee's Alice, and the landscape tower and the weapons and appearance of Alice in those scenes of the movie are very reminiscent of the same scenes in the game. Didn't know that, but interesting touch, Tim. Principal photography was scheduled for May 2008, but did not begin until September and concluded in 3 months. Scenes set in the Victorian era were shot on Torpoint and Plymouth from September 1st to October 14th. 250 local extras were chosen in early August. Locations included Antony House on Torpoint, Charleston, Cornwall, and the Barbican. However, no footage from the Barbican was used. Motion capture filming began in early October at Sony Picture Studios in Culver City, California, though the footage was later discarded. Filming also took place at Culver Studios. Burton said that he used a combination of live action and animation without motion capture. He also noted that this was the first time he had ever filmed on a green screen. Filming on the green screen portions comprising 90% of the film was completed after only 40 days. Many of the cast and crew felt nauseated as a result of the long hours surrounded by green, with Burton having lavender lenses fitted into his glasses to counteract the effect. Due to the constant need for digital effects to distort the actors' physical appearances, such as the size of the Red Queen's head or Alice's height, visual effects supervisor Ken Ralston cited the film as being exhausting, saying it was the biggest show I've ever done and the most creatively involved I've ever been. Sony Pictures Imageworks designed the visual effects sequences. Burton felt 3D was appropriate to the story's environment. Burton and Zona chose to film with conventional cameras and convert the footage into 3D during post-production. Zanuck explained 3D cameras were too expensive and clumsy to use, and they felt that there was no difference between converting footage and those shots into format. But then James Cameron, who released his 3D film Avatar in December 2009, criticized the choice, stating, "It doesn't make any sense to shoot in 2D and convert to 3D. Now, speaking of 3D, that explains one example of why I liked this film. While Monsters vs. Aliens may have been the first time I saw a real D3D film in theaters, this film was the first time I saw an IMAX 3D film in theaters. Now, while a lot of the stuff was dark, including the battle climax, there was still a lot of some funny moments, mostly from some of the characters that I'll get to in a little bit. Some things even brought back memories from the 1951 animated classic. So, now it's time to move on to the characters and their actors. Our main heroine, Alice Kingsley, is played by Mia Wasikowska. When creating the characters, screenwriter Linda Wolverton researched how young women were expected to behave in the Victorian era, and then made her the opposite. Wasikowska read Carol's books as a child, and reread them to prepare for her role. She also watched Jan Swaggmajer's Alice. She said, "When we were kids, my mom would pop it into our VCR. We would be disturbed and wouldn't really understand it, but we couldn't look away because it was too intriguing. But I had to keep that feeling about Alice. A kind of haunting feeling. Although facing pressures to conform to society's expectations, Alice grows into a strong-willed and empowered heroine who chooses her own path." Now, I like Mia's performance as Alice. I mean, she starts off a little distracted and unaware of what she's destined to do in Wonderland, and mostly she believes that everything around her there isn't really there. But later she does learn to accept her fate. Another thing I like about this version of Alice is her bravery. Also, when I saw this film in theaters, I was exactly the same age as Alice during that time. Next is my favorite character in the film, Terrence Hightop, aka the Mad Hatter, played by the great Johnny Depp, who's been in mostly every Tim Burton film and the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise. Depp and Burton decided that the Hatter's clothes, skin, and hair, along with his personality and accent, would change throughout the film and reflect his emotions. In an interview with Depp, the character was paralleled to a mood ring, and his emotions are very close to the surface. The Hatter is made up of different people and their extreme sides, with a gentle voice much like the character's creator Lewis Carroll reflecting a lighter personality, and with a Scottish Glaswegian, sometimes I can't pronounce it, a certain accent reflecting a darker, more dangerous personality. Illusionary dancer David Elsewhere Bernal doubled for Depp during the Futterwagon dance sequence nearing the end of the film. Now, why do I say he's my favorite character in the film? Well, for instance, he's funny, his Futterwagon dance is cool, and above all, he practically steals the whole show. Also, nowadays he's pretty similar but different compared to my role as Dr. Dodo in Alice One Cat's Tale. I mean, not the same kind of character, but a similar certain role, in a way. Next we come to the evil Erasabeth of Crims, aka the Red Queen, aka the Queen of Hearts, played by Helena Bonham Carter. Like Johnny Depp, she's been in mostly every Tim Burton film, and she also played Bellatrix Lestrange in the final Harry Potter films. Final four, to be exact. Her first name is a play on word, irascible, as she is easily irritated and quick to anger. Bonham Carter's head was digitally increased to 3 times its original size on screen. The character hates animals, and also hates she chooses to use them as servants and furniture. The actress took inspiration from her young daughter Nell, a toddler, stating that the Red Queen is like a toddler because she's got a big head and she's a tyrant. Now, she's a really threatening character like in the books, but what she does is, other than execute folks, she even captures a few of the gang and forces them to work for her. She even has 3 monstrous creatures on her side, like the Jub Jub bird, the Bandersnatch, who later sides with Alice, and worst of all, the Jabberwocky, which I'll get to later. Next up is my second favorite character, the beautiful Marana of Memorial, aka the White Queen, played by the beautiful Anne Hathaway. She was one of the few characters that did not require digital manipulation. Hathaway summed up her character with a caption of a magnet of Happy Birthday holding a knife. According to Hathaway, she comes from the same gene pool as the Red Queen. She really likes the dark side, but she's so scared of going too far into it, and that she's made everything appear very light and happy, but she's living in that place out of fear that she won't be able to control herself. Hathaway described her interpretation of the White Queen as a punk rock vegan pacifist, with inspiration drawn from Debbie Harry, Greta Garbo, and the artwork of Dan Flavin. Burton said that the White Queen's appearance was inspired by Nigella Lawson. Now, I love Anne's performance as this character. I mean, she's beautiful, sweet, and she's very supportive to help Alice get back to her normal height. Plus, White Queen is someone who I definitely want to side with any day. Next we come to Illo Svick-Stein, aka the Knave of Hearts, played by Crispin Glover, who was in one of the original Friday the 13th films and Robert Zemeckis' Beowulf film. The character is arrogant and tricky, and while following the Red Queen's every order, he's the only one capable of calming her dramatic mood swings. Glover said the Red Queen has a fair amount of short-tempered reactions to things that people do, and so the Knave has to be quite diplomatic. The Red Queen believes he is her lover, but this proves to be false. And nowadays I'd like to think of this guy in a similar role to the Jack of Hearts in Alice One Cat's Tale. Only unlike Jack, the Knave does not sing. Next up we come to the Tweedledee and Tweedledum, both played by Matt Lucas. Burton commented that the mixture of animation and Lucas stating that it was a weird mixture of things, which gives his characters the disturbing quality that they are so richly deserve. The characters are portrayed through a combination of CGI and live action, with Lucas' face digitally composited to a full animated body. While performing the character, Lucas had to wear a teardrop-shaped motion capture suit and walk on stilts in order to play both characters. Lucas was troubled by Ethan Coen. Now these two are still as funny as they are in the books and in the 1951 film. And I also love their teamwork skills at the ending battle. And their jokes are really funny. Now let's move on to the voice cast of this film. Now let's begin with Nevins McTwisp, aka the White Rabbit, who is voiced by Michael Sheen. Sheen said the character is such an iconic character that he didn't feel like he should break the mold too much. Burton said the quality he wanted most in his clock-watching rabbit was twitchiness, also commenting that any incarnation of the White Rabbit through the years, there's that sort of nervousness of a rabbit. Now his introduction in this movie is pretty similar but different compared to the books. I mean, sure, he does lead Alice to the rabbit hole, only this time he wasn't running late for something. In fact, he was looking all over England looking for Alice, hoping that she might follow him in hopes of saving Wonderland. Next up is Absalom the Caterpillar, voiced by Severus Snape himself, Alan Rickman. Rickman was originally going to have his face composed onto the animated caterpillar. He was filmed recording his voice in the studio, but the idea was eventually scrapped. The animators did, however, try to give Absalom's face characteristics similar to Rickman's. Now this guy does act similar to how he is in the books, but mostly he plays out like a sage or a wise man who prophesies the future. He also helped Alice remember when she last visited Wonderland when she was 6 years old, saying that all the stuff that she saw in her dreams were just memories. Next we have Mallyunkin, the Dormouse, voiced by Barbara Windsor. Burton said that he sought after Windsor for the role because he was a fan of her TV show EastEnders. Her voice sealed the deal for the role as the character. Now, she is in a way different from the books. She's not very drowsy, and she does have guts. Plus, I can't believe she would pull out the Bandersnatch's eye with a sewing needle. She even used it to stab Alice in the foot with it in hopes of waking her up. Jeez. Next we come to the Cheshire Cat, voiced by Stephen Fry. Burton stated that the character had a creepy quality in addition to tapping into his own hatred of cats. Weird. The role was intended to be played by Michael Sheen, but he changed his role to the White Rabbit due to his scheduling conflicts. This guy is another of my favorites in this film, mostly due to the way he talks, and also he saves the Mad Hatter from being executed by not only impersonating him, but also pulling a little joke that might give Dr. Seuss a little laugh. It's like what I like to call the Cheshire Cat in the Hat. Next we come to Bayard the Bloodhound, voiced by Timothy Spall, who was in the Harry Potter films, along with Sweeney Todd, Demon Barber of Fleet Street, the series of Unfortunate Events with Jim Carrey, and Disney's Enchanted. Although Bayard does not appear in the book, a similar character named the Puppy is likely the inspiration for the character. Now this character starts out as a prisoner of the Red Queen until the knave hires him to sniff out Alice in exchange for his and his family's freedom. Luckily he's on the good guy's side, and he does make a great supporting character. Next we come to the most feared creature in Wonderland, the Jabberwocky, voiced by Christopher Lee. While this creature only has 2 lines, Burton said that he felt Lee to be a good match for the iconic character, because he is an iconic guy. For the character, Lee had originally tried to make his voice burble. However, Tim Burton convinced him to use his actual voice, as he found it more intimidating. Despite all this fearsome monster is really scary, but really cool. In fact, I like the Jabberwocky's design, and the amount of attacks he does while fighting Alice wielding the Vopal sword. Rounding out the cast is Paul Whiteshore as the March Hare, and Michael Golf as Dodo. Now it's time to move on to my final words of this film. Above all, Tim Burton's Alice in Wonderland is a great film, but not perfect, though. The way the story is, well, makes me not want to call this film a remake, though, but more of a live-action sequel to the books. But that doesn't mean I still can't like it. The background visuals look cool and interesting, the characters are still as memorable as they are in the books, and as memorable as they are in the 1951 film, too. And the ending battle is just so thrilling and awesome. Now, I hear there's going to be a sequel next year, but sadly, Tim Burton isn't directing it. But on the other hand, I'm glad he's going to produce it. As for my final rating, I give this film a 78% out of 100. But if any of you viewers out there would like to see Alice One Cat's Tale performed at Musical Theater Village, then by all means go to this website for information on tickets. But you have until July 5th to see it. Well, that's it for today, brothers. Be sure to tune in next time, because I have a little request to fulfill from one of my subscribers. Mustang Power.